Hello, welcome. My name's Tom, and we're back talking about F1 Fantasy. We're going into the Chinese Grand Prix, and I have a dilemma on my hands, as I'm sure many of us have dilemmas on our hands this week, this couple of weeks. The next couple of races are big, important races in the season because they're sprint races. People are thinking about using chips, throwing some chips into the mix. People are thinking, do I go with the Verstappen build with the super budget builders? Do I stick with a build like I've got on screen at the moment with a Perez or a Sainz or whatever as the two times and try and grow my budget a little bit more? I've been umming and ahhing and thinking and scratching my head a lot and doing lots of thinking and working stuff out as to what the best option is. And I don't have a definitive answer. None of us do, because we're still effectively playing this guessing game. That's what fantasy is, but we can do our best guess, and that's what I'm going to be trying to do in this video, is putting forward my best guess as to what is the best option for me personally, and then hopefully that will also help a lot of you guys, because we're all in slightly different positions, and what the best option is will be team dependent. A bit of a cliche from fantasy content creators, but it is team dependent, because if, for example, you can afford the Verstappen build with the likes of a Hulkenberg and Magnussen, and maybe you've got like one or two Saubers or whatever, or an Albon and Guan Yu Zhou, but you can fit it. You don't basically, you can avoid Sargent is the main thing. Avoiding Sargent, avoiding Bottas, the Sauber pit stop problems. If you've got a big enough budget, an extra couple of million than what I've got, then you're sitting pretty, and you don't have to think too much about it. You just put Verstappen in there on top of the Ferraris and Red Bulls, and off you go. Happy days. However, I personally, if I switch up straight away, show you what I need to do to bring in the likes of Verstappen on top of this build, which I can just about afford. Now, I could have afforded this team last week. In fact, I could have afforded taking out Albon and putting in Hulkenberg and going to this team, and it would have actually worked out almost amazingly perfectly, because I would have got price rises from Bottas and Sargent. I would have avoided the Albon DNF, would have got Hulkenberg's points and his price rise instead. However, I do think that's a kind of a less than average kind of scenario, and I think I actually got very unlucky. If we have a quick look at F1 Fantasy Tours, and this is not just me going, I'm sure I'm lucky, blah blah blah, but it's just like, it's actually looking at this more closely has made me think a bit more about the whole budget building thing, and actually how much is it actually worth it. Now, what I mean by that is I'm looking at Perez specifically here. Perez scored 33 points in Japan. In order to get that 1 million rise, we can, if I whip out the calculator, let's bring that over here for 2 seconds. So we look at the average for Japan, and using the algorithm we know has been cracked a couple of weeks ago, the average in Japan is 10.7. So where's my calculator gone? Lost it. So we do 10.7 into the calculator, and we times that by the threshold for the category B drivers, which Perez falls under, which is 3.1. So he needs to get 3.1 times the average score that week to get the million right. So we worked that out, and it comes to 33.17. What did Perez score? He scored 33. Sorry, just bring the calculator back again. Hopefully you can just about see that. 33.17 was the threshold. Perez got 33, and it's like, yes, I can feel very hard done by that. I'm 0.17 points off. Effectively, Perez basically needs to get 34. Or, if Sargent, for example, DNF'd because he went into the gravel, and I was thinking, oh, it looks like a DNF to me, but then he managed to put it out and still come away with 9 points, so that bumped up the average. So if Sargent, for example, had DNF'd in Japan, that would have dragged the average score down. Perez would have probably got the million rise, and I'd be sitting pretty. However, that's not the case. And I was thinking, at first I was like, I feel really hard done by. That's unlucky, blah, blah, blah. And to a large extent, yes, that's true. But it also made me think, like, how often is it actually that anyone was going to get that 1 million price rise? And I think maybe we've had a little bit of recency bias with the likes of Leclerc and Perez getting 1 million rises already this season. And everyone's thinking, oh, yeah, it seems quite easy to get the 1 million rise. But I was looking through, like, last season as well. And I was going through, when it loads, I was going through... Come on, F1 Fantasy Tools, there we go. I was going through, like, looking at the averages. Again, you can see all the averages down the bottom here. And I was calculating, like, how often people actually would have got that 1 million rise. And the answer is, on average, I haven't worked out the exact number. I haven't gone through every single one. I'm sorry. I haven't done the maths for everyone. You can do that yourself. But basically, I went through a bunch of them. And on average, it's like one, maybe two drivers would have got a million rise. But on average, it's like one or no one. A lot of the time, it's Verstappen that's scooping up the points. And that's probably going to be the case this year as well. And so to hit that threshold of 3.1 normalized points for the likes of a Perez, a Sainz, or a Leclerc, is actually it's not hugely likely. And like I say, Perez had a great week in Japan. He did everything right. He got second in qualifying. He got second in the race. He made some overtakes in the race. Like, everything went really well. And yes, it was very close, but the bottom line is he didn't get that 1 million rise, and therefore I'm suddenly thinking, like, is it actually worth it? Because, Verstappen's almost certainly going to go up 0.2, because that's just what that's what he's capable of in the A category. So then you're really banking, again, if I just switch it back to my original team here, you're really, really banking on this budget building very heavily on the likes of Stroll in particular, who's the most likely to gain you points because he's in the best car in that C category. But even then, he's like, on average, probably going to get the 500,000 rise. Sometimes we'll get the million rise. He's very susceptible to DNF, so you never know if he's going to get any of that. Then you're kind of looking at the likes of Hulkenberg, who, again, the Hazards have impressed, but then is banking on Hulkenberg rising enough to avoid Verstappen for the week. I'm starting to think more and more that this whole budget building thing, as tempting as it is and as potentially great it could be in terms of upgrading your budget drivers going forward, the more and more I think about it, the more I look at the numbers and the likelihood of things happening. And we saw how much this bit me in particular, and I'm sure it bit a lot of teams. But I had last week, I had the double DNF with Albon and Guan Yu Zhou, and then in contrast to that, you had like the likes of Bottas and Sargent, who I'm trying to avoid, actually go up 500,000. So it's like, you can, like I said, I think that's a below average kind of scenario. I don't think that's going to happen very often. I don't think the likes of Sargent and Bottas are going to climb that much in value that much. But it just goes to show that playing this budget building game is a bit of a risk. I mean, it is definitely a risk. I knew that going into Japan. But I was thinking about the average, the average sort of case scenario is that the likes of what you see on screen with Stroll and Hulkenberg, Perez, on average, that's going to gain me a chunk more than the likes of a Sargent, Bottas, Verstappen build. And while, like I say, on average that's true, how many weeks am I going to put up with this before I actually, I'm happy to upgrade my budget driver? How many weeks do I need to persevere with this to get from a Sargent to a non-Sargent effectively? Because that's kind of what I'm looking at. I don't know. I mean, I think I might have to stick with this for at least a few more weeks to gain enough money to go, to get like something like a Verstappen, Hulkenberg, and Kevin Magnussen, for example. I need to get 3 million to get that for kind of the dream team there. And there's just too much uncertainty, too much unknowns, too much risk. As it is, with the ultimate budget drivers that I can afford at the moment, if I put all the budget guys in, I'm only 0.4 off this team, and I'm therefore at quite high risk of just dropping below this possibility to actually afford this team. So I'm not sure how much more risk I want to put into it. I mean, you could argue that maybe this isn't even like the dream team, and maybe you want to budget build further, as I've said previously, in order to get the McLarens in when the upgrades come in a couple of races time. So maybe building budget is worth it, just try and squeeze a bit out there. But again, as I've already touched on earlier in this video, I'm not sure exactly how consistent this building budget actually is, and in the meantime we're just bleeding Verstappen points when we don't have him in our team. Of course, there is the DNF value and the pit stop trouble by going with a quad budget build of this, with the Sargent, Zhou, Albon, Bottas build for me personally. If you're someone that can afford like a Magnussen or a Hulkenberg instead of one of these guys, but in particular if you can afford it instead of Sargent, then I think I would just absolutely go for it. Now this is in quite stark contrast to what I've been thinking, pre-Japan, where it's like budget building, but now the more I think about it, like, am I actually building my budget? Am I just putting myself at risk of falling further and further behind? Should I just cut my losses then? Then I also think, like, if I go with this Verstappen build, and, like as I've already said, on the average case kind of scenario is this, these budget guys are not going to go up on average. They're probably going to bleed me some money. Then I'm kind of just stuck with them. And then maybe also, like, going forward, you kind of don't even need to go to the Verstappen build. Maybe you could look at eventually moving, maybe not with a Perez, like a Science. Maybe Sainz and Leclerc, but I've got 16 million there, and the next, I need to make another 5 million to get up to like a double big driver build here. You could also, I can actually just about afford Fernando Alonso, so you could actually, go for a team like this, but then Fernando Alonso is not great for budget building because he's now in the B category as well. But you could potentially, if you look to build budget, you could move off Fernando Alonso into like a Perez or a Leclerc. But like I said, you're still I'm personally like what 5 million off from doing that, so it's quite a way. So I'm not sure again, in terms of how long that's going to take. It's going to take at least a couple of races probably to build that budget, and random DNFs and things can just completely screw up your strategy. But that is something to bear in mind going to this kind of double premium driver here, going without the Verstappen, and going with Verstappen is not going to get you any, basically not going to get you any budget. So you're kind of stuck with this team. You're kind of stuck with the Bottas, Sargent, Verstappen build for the foreseeable future. Whereas other people who are playing the patient long game will be sitting there, maybe accruing their budget. But like I've said, it's a lot of risk in terms of trying to build the budget. And like I say, if it takes you 3, 4, 5 races to get enough budget to get in like that double premium driver build, and in those 3, 4, 5 races, someone's just sat on Verstappen with a bunch of budget guys. The budget guys on average score like 0, but Verstappen, Red Bull, and Ferrari on average score like 200 odd points. Then who's winning there? Then obviously the Verstappen guys are winning. But then, like long term, who knows? It's very, very difficult. There's lots of unknown quantities that we're kind of dealing with here. How much do we go into the budget build and how much we go into the just hard points? And obviously, it's very important because we've got 2 sprint races as well. So we're trying to maximise the kind of Verstappen points, which we expect to get over the course of the 2 sprint races in China and Miami. And then you've also got the Limitless kind of usage. In terms of using Limitless, it's something that's been strongly in my mind as well. So again, if we hop it back to here, and I suppose using the Limitless now kind of gives you the best of both worlds, at least in China, because it means you can maximize out your points using the Limitless team, but you get the underlying budget gains from your team that left Japan. So for me personally, I would get this team building me budget, but I'd also get the Verstappen points using Limitless in China, or I could potentially save that, keep this team, just like have faith in the budget building potential of the team, even though I've already stated that I don't quite have that faith at the moment. But then carry this through, hope for the best in China, and admit that I'm going to lose a few points, but hopefully build budget, and then go Limitless in Miami, and then again try and gain budget. But I really am clenching my teeth, thinking this is really scary going about 2 times on Verstappen for a sprint race. But then again I did it for Japan, but the sprint races are just extra points available, and it just seems really risky going without Verstappen. It'd be a brave person to go without Verstappen. I'm sure there'll be people out there that will do it. I personally don't know if I'm brave enough, and like I've already stated, I'm not sure exactly how reliable this budget building has proven to be. Again, it could be just some recency bias that I got burnt with it in the last race, but who knows. But yeah, in terms of using Limitless, I guess it kind of depends on the practice session and the sprint qualifying, because we're going to have the sprint qualifying before the deadline. So we're going to have a very good idea of, if the Ferraris and Red Bulls are 1, 2, 3, 4, then Limitless looks really good. In terms of people being put off by Limitless, because it's a bit of an unknown track, we haven't been here for a few years, there's potential bit of rain in the air, just unknowns. I think. And the fact that we only get, that one practice session plus the sprint qualifying at least means people are kind of put off from using Limitless. And in fact, some people might even be pushed more towards using no negative because there's so much uncertainty, which I think is absolutely fine. But I personally, I'm probably going to be using Limitless or nothing. And if I don't use Limitless either this weekend or Miami, when am I even going to think of using it? I'll try and reserve it for a sprint race further down the line, like Austria, for example, or maybe Kota. Kind of safe-ish tracks, but at that point further down the line, people are going to have bigger budgets, and then the differential between your Limitless team and people's current team isn't quite as big as well. So in terms of maximizing the Limitless chip, I think it might be better to use it kind of nowish. When I say nowish, I mean China or Miami is kind of optimal. We know with some amount of certainty that McLarens are going to struggle around China. Around Miami, I also don't think they're going to be especially great. So yeah, maybe with the McLarens not being as strong, and therefore the Ferraris and Red Bulls are likely to be the best 2 teams, at least very clearly now, whereas we don't know that for sure later on in the season. Perhaps now is the best time to use Limitless. But then, if I use Limitless in China, that means I keep this underlying team, which in theory is great because it gets the budget building from it. But if the budget building underlying budget building goes wrong, then suddenly in Miami I can't get to the Verstappen build with the budget fodder. It's really difficult. Or I could do I could move to the Verstappen build now, which again would require -10 because I've only got 2 transfers annoyingly. Let's pop it back in here. So I could move to this build now and then go Limitless in Miami, just to secure this kind of build here, and then go Limitless in Miami to ensure I get both Verstappen 2 times in the sprint races. That is an option as well. But again, in terms of budget building, the underlying budget building for Miami, then my team would be this, and that would be my budget building team. But then do I need to build budget when I've just got Verstappen sat on top of Red Bull and Ferrari? But then, how many people can actually afford Verstappen right now? Is just Verstappen on top of a bunch of budget rubbish just better than what like 95% of the teams can afford? I don't know what the general kind of budget consensus is across the game. My feeling is there's quite a few people that can afford the Verstappen build now, but there's still some people, I know there's still some engaged managers out there as well that are priced out of it. So maybe I should just be like, think, be a bit more grateful for the fact I can afford it right now and just go for it. Stop wasting time trying to faff around building budget and risking losing this build entirely for the potential gain of $500,000 or $1 million or whatever it is. However, going with a team like this, just seeing Logan Sargent looking back at me, he's just got a DNF in him. It's got to come at some point. With effectively 4 opportunities for it over the next couple of weekends with, sprint race plus Grand Prix coming up. Is the DNF just going to hurt? I don't know, but then the DNF obviously will hurt, and the DNFs are probably more likely from him than, say, a Hulkenberg, or even like a Gasly or whatever. But, is the strength of Verstappen and the consistency of Verstappen just going to outscore any DNF? -20 for Sargent. Verstappen in a sprint weekend might just outscore that and just negate that loss. And especially over the course, like I said, if you want a budget build and you're looking to do it over the next 2 or 3 weeks or whatever, in the meantime, Verstappen's just plugging away like P1. Sargent might even get a couple of DNFs. He gets -40, but then as Verstappen points as 2 times, just powerful enough to drag you over the likes of people who are on these teams with Sainz, Leclerc or Perez as the 2 times. And my gut's feeling is that actually Verstappen is probably strong enough. He's just so strong, just so consistent, and having him on top of these 2 big constructors is just great. So honestly, as you can probably tell by this video so far, I'm still very, very torn. Like I said, I spent a lot of time thinking about this for the last couple of weeks, and I've been going one way and the other. And at some point, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go the Verstappen build, and then like I think about it later on in the day, I'm like, yeah, I'm going with the budget build, and I'm gonna go Limitless, and I'm gonna go Limitless in China, and then I'm gonna go Limitless in Miami, and then suddenly I'm going round and round and round, and who knows where I'm actually going to end up. But like I say, we have got FP1 and we have got the sprint quali before the deadline. Don't forget sprint quali before the deadline, very important, and giving us some more information about exactly who we want to pick, and that will help me to certainly make my final decision. If I'm talking like it's the absolute end of the world if I can't get to this Verstappen build. Like I said, if I'm currently on this build. If the budget building goes wrong over the next week or 2, imagine I go with this team, the budget building goes a bit wrong, suddenly I'm locked out of the possibility of getting Verstappen on top of Red Bull and Ferrari. I'm talking like it's the end of the world. Is it actually the end of the world? In the long run, yes, it probably is the end of the world because Verstappen's just going to score so many points for the rest of the season. But also, I think on average this team is good at budget building. However, I'm just not sure it's enough good at budget building. Gaining. In fact, why don't we throw it over to F1 Fantasy Tools actually? Have a quick look at the team calculator and have a look at like the kind of comparison here. So if I put my team 1 in, we can see like the actual value gain isn't actually that much difference. So more or less, I can't. Where are we here? Yeah. So we put 3 transfers in there and refresh that. We see Verstappen actually, if I use my 3 transfers, it recommends that build as the best option. Going all in with the budget. Just forget about price rise and whatever. Forget about point scoring. Just Verstappen 2 times. Red Bull, Ferrari is the best. Look at the price gain. It's 1.26. The next best option is more or less the team I've got. Give or take like an Albon over whoever that is. Bottas. And that gives me +2. So effectively, I'm giving up what 0.74, so 750,000 in budget. So if I go this, I'm saying like, oh yeah, I'm going to gain 750,000 in budget on average. And the points differential is actually only 7 points according to F1 Fantasy Tools. It's very, very minimal when you think about it. But of course, it's not just these kind of simulation points that we're trying to get. It's also the consistency, that supreme consistency of Verstappen that we're kind of trying to get as well. But yeah, looking at it, it's actually like incredibly, incredibly close. And it is quite a big difference in terms of price game. But like in general, is it worth it? Maybe it is worth just building the budget based on the fact that the predicted points are so close. But like I say, maybe that also goes to show that maybe it's not the be all and end all. If we can't get to the Verstappen build, you can still score good points and grow your budget a little bit. So yeah, I'm still very, very torn. Like I said throughout this video, you probably kind of going this way and that way. That's how I've been going for the last couple of weeks. And beyond that, I'm going to wait for FP1 and sprint qualifying before finalise my decision, because we need to scrape every little bit of information out of the barrel that we can before this deadline, because it's an important deadline. And those are kind of my thoughts and feelings at the moment. I hope it hasn't been too rambly as usual. Hopefully it's been useful for some of you. And yeah, like I say, I'll lock my team in after the sprint quali, and whether that's Limitless, whether that's what I'm doing at the moment, whether that's changing to Verstappen, I'll let you guys know. So yeah, I'll see you soon for some more F1 fantasy content. In the meantime, I'm just gonna sit here, look at my computer, just scratching my head a little bit more, because I'm still a little bit like, just it's tough, and yeah. Anyway, thanks for listening to me ramble on into the evening. So catch you soon for some more F1 fantasy content. Bye for now.